There are decisions in life we make with hope, with trust, and sometimes, without knowing what lies ahead. At 82 years old, I've lived through joys, losses, lessons, and love. But if there's one decision I wish I could go back and reconsider, it's the day I agreed to move into a nursing home. At the time, it felt like the right thing to do. My family reassured me it was for the best. They promised care, comfort, safety, and I wanted to believe them. I truly did. But stepping through those doors changed everything. What looked like security on the outside came at a cost I didn't fully understand until it was too late. I traded more than just a house key. I gave up my independence, my daily choices, the small freedoms that made life feel like it was mine. And the hardest part? No one warned me what that would feel like. I'm sharing this not out of bitterness, but out of honesty. Because I know there are others out there, maybe you, maybe someone you love, who are standing where I once stood, considering the same move, wondering if a nursing home is the safest path forward. And maybe it is. But maybe it isn't. In this video, I want to tell you the 6 things I wish someone had told me before I made that choice. Things no brochure will ever print. Things no well-meaning conversation ever fully captured. These lessons are not just about aging. They're about identity, freedom, dignity, and what it really means to live. Stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to share might change how you think about care, growing older, and the life you still have the power to shape. This could be the message someone you love needs to hear before making a decision that, once made, is rarely reversed. Let's begin. 1. Realizing it's harder to leave than you think. When I first moved into the nursing home, I told myself it was temporary. I thought I'd give it a try, see how things went, and if I didn't like it, I could always leave. But what I didn't realize was just how hard it would be to get out once I was in. At first it seemed simple. If I didn't like it, I'd just go back home. But home wasn't the same anymore. My house sat empty, and maintaining it from a distance became difficult. My children had already started making changes, selling things they thought I wouldn't need, even considering renting out the place. When I brought up the idea of returning, they hesitated. "Are you sure you can manage on your own? Wouldn't it be safer to stay? We just want what's best for you." And then there was the issue of physical decline. After months of living in a place where I didn't have to cook, clean, or even walk very far, I wasn't as strong as I used to be. The independence I once had started slipping away, making the idea of moving back home more difficult than I ever imagined. I wasn't as confident in my ability to live alone, and that fear kept me stuck. I met others who had the same experience. They thought they'd try the nursing home for a little while, only to realize that leaving wasn't as easy as they thought. The longer you stay, the harder it becomes to adjust to life outside. Some people even lost the option entirely. Once their home was sold or their savings were drained by the cost of care, there was no going back. That's the part nobody tells you. Moving in feels like a decision you can reverse. But for most people, it isn't. The nursing home slowly becomes your whole world. And before you know it, the outside life you once knew starts feeling like a distant memory. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared for the possibility that once you go in, leaving might not be as simple as you think? Because once you settle in, the barriers to leaving, whether financial, physical, or emotional, can be harder to overcome than you expect. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 1 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. 2. The loss of privacy and dignity. One of the things I didn't fully consider before moving into a nursing home was just how much privacy I would lose. At home, I had my own space. I could close my bedroom door, sit in silence if I wanted, and do things on my own terms. But in a nursing home, privacy is a luxury you don't always get to keep. From the moment I arrived, I felt like I was constantly being watched. Staff coming in and out. Scheduled room checks. And shared spaces where you're rarely alone. Even simple things like getting dressed or using the bathroom often required someone's assistance. I know they were just doing their job. But it's not easy to accept help for things you've done independently your entire life. I remember my first week, struggling with the idea that I had to ask for permission to do things I once did without thinking. Want to take a shower? You might have to wait until someone is available to help. Need to use the restroom? Sometimes pressing the call button means waiting longer than you'd like. Even meal choices were limited. If you don't like what's on the menu that day, well, too bad. And then there was the issue of roommates. Not everyone gets a private room. And sharing a space with someone else, someone you didn't choose, can be frustrating. I was lucky to have a kind roommate. But I heard stories from others who weren't so fortunate. Some had roommates who were loud, unclean, or even had cognitive issues that made sleep nearly impossible. And no matter how much you try to make your room feel like home, it's never truly yours. Dignity is a hard thing to lose. And I didn't realize how much of mine I'd have to surrender until I was already there. When people knock but don't always wait for an answer before coming in. When you're spoken to like a patient instead of a person. When your daily routines are dictated by a schedule you didn't create. It changes you. You start feeling less like yourself and more like just another name on a list. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, are you prepared to give up the privacy and control you've had your entire life? Because once it's gone, it's hard to get back. 3. Declining health faster than expected. Before I moved into a nursing home, I was doing well for my age. I wasn't running marathons, but I could still take care of myself, go for walks, and cook my own meals. I had my little routines that kept me moving, grocery shopping, stretching in the mornings, even just walking around the house to keep my legs strong. But once I moved in, everything changed. At first, it seemed like I was just taking it easy. Meals were brought to me, and I no longer had to stand in the kitchen to cook. If I needed something, I could just push a button and someone would come help. But what I didn't realize was that the less I did for myself, the weaker I became. I stopped moving as much, and soon my legs felt stiffer. I sat more than I used to. And before I knew it, getting up from a chair started feeling like a chore. The muscles I had spent years maintaining were disappearing faster than I ever expected. And it wasn't just me. I saw it happen to others too. People who walked in on their own 2 feet were suddenly relying on wheelchairs. People who had once been independent now needed help with things they never struggled with before. The more help we were given, the more we seemed to need it. I remember my neighbor Alice, an 81-year-old woman who was lively when she first arrived. She used to take daily walks around the facility, insisting that she wasn't going to slow down just because of a number. But after a few months, I noticed she wasn't walking as much. Then she started using a walker. Then a wheelchair. One day she looked at me and said, "I don't know when it happened, but I feel like I aged 10 years in just a few months." And that's exactly what it felt like. When you stop using your body, you start losing it. And in a nursing home where everything is designed to make things easier, it's easy to forget that movement isn't just about convenience, it's about surviving. If I had known how quickly I would lose my strength, I would have fought harder to keep moving, to stay active, to push myself even when I didn't feel like it. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, will you still have the motivation to keep your body strong when everything is set up to make life effortless? Because once you slow down, getting back up isn't as easy as you think. 4. Losing my sense of purpose. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought I was just changing where I lived. I didn't realize I was also changing why I lived. At home, I had responsibilities. I had routines, hobbies, and a reason to get up in the morning. Even the small things, watering the plants, making my own coffee, tidying up my space, gave me a sense of purpose. But in the nursing home, those daily rituals disappeared. Meals were made for me. Cleaning was done by someone else. The plants? Well, they weren't mine to take care of anymore. At first, I told myself it would be nice to finally relax. No more chores. No more responsibilities. Just rest. But after a few weeks, I realized something was missing. The days felt long, stretched out with nothing to do but wait. I saw it in other residents too. People who had once been full of energy now spent their days sitting, staring, waiting for time to pass. There was a man named George, 84 years old, who had been a carpenter his entire life. At home, he was always fixing things, building little projects in his garage. But here? There were no tools. No projects. Nothing for him to create. I watched as he slowly withdrew, his hands once strong and skilled, now idle in his lap. "I feel useless," he told me one day. And I knew exactly what he meant. When you no longer have something to care for, something to work toward, life starts to lose its meaning. The mind slows down. The body follows. And soon, you start to feel like just another resident in a place where time moves, but nothing really changes. If you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, what gives your life meaning? Because once you move in, finding purpose isn't as simple as filling your time. It's about fighting to hold on to the things that make you feel alive. 5. Feeling forgotten. There's a quiet kind of pain that comes with realizing the world no longer waits for you. That's what it felt like after I moved into the nursing home. In the beginning, everything seemed hopeful. My family reassured me they'd visit often, and I truly believed them. At first, they did. My daughter came every week, bringing updates, warmth, and familiar laughter. My grandchildren stopped by with stories from school and dreams of the future. I clung to those moments like lifelines, thinking they would last. But slowly, the rhythm changed. Life outside moved on. The calls replaced the visits. The "I'll come by soon" turned into "I've just been so busy lately." I understood, they had their lives, their obligations, but understanding it didn't make it any easier. Holidays were the most difficult. Everyone said they'd come. They meant it, I'm sure. But somehow, things always came up. And as I sat alone in the common room, I'd look around and see others like me, quietly watching the door, holding on to hope that today, someone would remember. It's not that my family stopped loving me. Love doesn't always vanish, it fades into the background, buried under to-do lists, traffic, and unread messages. And here, behind these walls, it's easy to be forgotten. I remember one evening, sitting on the edge of my bed, phone in hand. I stared at my son's number for minutes. I wanted to hear his voice, to feel remembered, if only for a moment. But I was afraid of being a burden, of being met with silence or guilt. So I put the phone down and stared at the ceiling, feeling smaller than I had in years. This is what loneliness looks like, not loud, not dramatic. Just a slow, quiet ache that grows heavier each day. If you're thinking about moving into a nursing home, ask yourself honestly, are you prepared for the silence that follows after the visits fade? Because even when you're surrounded by people, the deepest kind of loneliness is feeling like the people who matter most have moved on without you. 6. Losing my independence. When you picture life in a nursing home, most people think of small rooms, scheduled meals, and shared spaces. But what caught me most off guard wasn't any of that, it was the slow, invisible loss of independence, of personal freedom, of the right to decide how I live my own life. Before I came here, I still had control. I chose when to get up, how to spend my afternoons, what to eat, and when to rest. I took pride in my small routines, watering plants, preparing my meals, walking around the neighborhood just to feel the breeze. These weren't just tasks. They were mine. They gave structure to my day and meaning to my life. But inside the nursing home, my schedule no longer belonged to me. Wake-up calls came at a fixed time. Meals were served whether I was hungry or not. If I wanted to go outside for some fresh air, I had to ask. Sometimes I waited half an hour or more until someone was free to help. Even choosing my clothes felt like asking for permission. Slowly, I stopped asking. I stopped resisting. And eventually, I just adapted to the system because it was easier. But with every small choice taken away, a little part of me faded. I remember one morning, waking up early out of habit. I stretched out my arms and reached for my book, only to realize it wasn't there. Neither were the photos I kept on my nightstand at home. Neither was the armchair where I used to sit and watch the sunset. The room was clean, functional, even safe, but it wasn't mine. And that's when it truly hit me. I wasn't just living somewhere new. I was living in someone else's idea of what life should be. Independence is easy to take for granted, until it's gone. And once you lose it, getting it back feels like trying to hold water in your hands. So if you're considering a nursing home, ask yourself, can you live with letting go of the little decisions that make you feel human? Because once those choices are gone, it's not just your routine that changes, it's your identity. Looking back, I've come to realize that growing old isn't the hardest part, it's what we lose along the way that leaves the deepest mark. The truth is, I didn't expect to feel invisible. I didn't expect to question my worth. And I certainly didn't expect that the simple act of choosing when to get out of bed or what to wear would one day feel like a luxury. Moving into a nursing home changed my life, but not in the ways I was promised. It didn't give me more freedom, it quietly took mine away. It didn't bring me closer to people, it slowly placed a distance between me and the world I once belonged to. And while it offered structure and care, it came at the cost of the very things that made life feel like it was mine. But this message isn't meant to discourage, it's meant to awaken. To remind you that your independence, your voice, your daily rituals, they matter more than you think. If you're standing at a crossroads, wondering if this is the right path for you or someone you love, I hope you'll take a step back. Ask the hard questions. Explore every option. Fight for the life you still have before you hand it over to a system that might not protect the parts of you that matter most. Because in the end, it's not just about where we live, it's about how we live, and whether we still get to decide what that means for ourselves. Thank you for listening. If any part of this touched you, or made you reflect, I hope you'll share your thoughts below. Let's keep this conversation going, because our stories matter. And so do the choices we make.